In a few days, I'm going to be jumping on an aeroplane and flying down to Tasmania, and that always makes me anxious. Not the flying part, but flying with photography gear. See, I'm heading down to Tasmania for 10 days of photography, that when I rock up to the airport with my camera gear in my backpack. Now I've got the f-stop Agenda bag, which just looks like a backpack, but it can take a fair bit. But my anxiety is that I'll rock up to that check-in counter, they'll weigh that bag and they won't let me take it on as carry-on, and they'll want me to check it in. Now I've looked at the Virgin site, and you know, they do have some provisions there for fragile goods, but it looks like all they're doing is covering their bum because they don't want breakages on their flight that they're going to have to cover. It doesn't say anything about photography equipment at all. But I've heard too many stories now of photographers that are getting pulled up at the check-in counter and getting their bags weighed, or their bags are getting weighed as they're boarding the aeroplane, and that's the worst time because you can't stuff anything into your check-in bag, and they're forcing people to check in their camera bag. Now the f-stop Agenda is quite clever. It has an ICU, or an internal camera unit, that you can pull out of the bag if you were forced to, and you know, maybe that's a way around it. But I've done something interesting which I'm going to share with you in this video, and then I've spent some time going through looking at what my requirements are for this trip. I'm going to take you through exactly what gear I'm taking, why I'm taking it, and I'm going to weigh everything, and I'll share with you at the end of this video how much everything weighed and whether I decide what I decided to take based on the fact that I'm going to try and pack under that 7 kilo limit. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to work out what are the different missions that I need to fulfill during my trip. So if I think about it in the types of photography that I'm going to be doing whilst I'm in Tasmania, I'm going to be doing landscape photography, so I'll need to take equipment to do that. I'll be doing macro photography, lots of great fungus and things to be able to take photos of in the rainforest. And then I'm going to need my main body, and then I always like to take a backup body when I travel. And then I've got to think about wildlife, okay, because we're going to be doing some wildlife shooting on this trip as well. Now, they're the sort of the key things there. So landscape, need a main body, need a backup body, need macro and wildlife. Now, with my macro setup, I like to have an off-camera flash, so I can light things like fungi. And with my landscape setup, I like to make sure I've got filters. So I've got my Lee filter kits for both camera setups, and it's really important that I do that. And then finally, I need to think about a wireless remote trigger system of some sort, because when I take photos, I'd rather use a wireless trigger if that's possible. So let's start by looking at Nikon. What do I have in Nikon to fulfill these needs? So for my landscape photography, I have the 14 to 24mm lens, and I also have the Lee filter kit. And then I need to add this other bag, which is like the ring that clips on the front of the lens. I've got my main body, which is the Nikon D810, and a backup, which is the Nikon D800. For macro, I have the Sigma 105mm macro lens. For off-camera flash, I have the Nikon SB910. For wildlife, I have the 70 to 200 f2.8, and I'll also need a teleconverter to get a bit closer. That's the 1.7, and then my wireless remote. Let's take a look at the Fuji gear. For landscape, I have the 10 to 24mm lens. My main body, I have the Fuji X-T1, and as a backup, the X-E1. Once again, I have a Lee filter kit. This is the Lee 7.5, which works great on the 10 to 24mm lens. For macro, I'm stuck because I don't have a macro lens for the Fuji setup. For wildlife, I have a 100 to 400mm lens. Now, it's not the fastest of lenses, but it is a great lens for what I need. And then from a remote point of view, I have a wide remote. I can always use the Fuji app. That's a little bit of a cumbersome thing to use. Now for macro, what I could do is I could use my 18mm f2 or the 35mm 1.2 and get an extension tube. Fuji makes those. For the fill flash or the off-camera flash, I don't have a solution because I only have this funny little flash that comes with the Fuji, which goes in the hot shoe. So I'd have to solve that issue as well. As you can see in size, there's definitely a big difference between the Fuji and the Nikon gear, and I'm sure you won't be surprised that there isn't in weight either. Besides that 100 to 400 lens of the Fuji, most of the Fuji lenses are a lot lighter, and we'll come to that in a second. The f-stop bag itself is 1.7 kilos, so a pretty light bag, and the ICU, I have the medium slope ICU, and it's 540 grams, so just over half a kilo. So 2.7 kilos is going to be taken up with the bag and the ICU. All up, the Fuji gear that I showed you was 3.8 kilos or 3,838 grams. So 3.8 kilos, so just under the 4 kilo mark, which is pretty cool. The Nikon gear was 7.8 kilos. So you can see it's pretty much double the amount of weight to take the Nikon kit versus the Fuji kit. And like I said, there were some things that I didn't throw in there. One of the other things that we do have to take in our carry-on is our spare batteries, because they don't let you check those in. You know, looking at that, if I add the Agena bag and the IC unit, the Fuji kit was 6.6 kilos and the Nikon kit was 10.5 kilos. So it goes without saying, I'm going to be taking the Fuji kit with me to Tasmania. Let's hope it performs flawlessly. My only reservation is not all of the lenses are weather sealed, and you know, this time of year it does snow and rain a lot in Tassie, so we may be putting the Fuji up to its paces. The other thing is, of course, the backup camera is not as good as what I had in the Nikon range, so I've just got to hope that my X-T1 continues to perform flawlessly and I'll be a happy chappy. So there you go. You know, when you're traveling with your camera gear, quite tricky to do, and hopefully this video has helped you. If you did enjoy the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. So thanks for tuning in. Until next time, get out there and take some photos.